Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today for this event and also for Discoverfest. If you've been watching today and yesterday, we are in day 2 of a whole week just jam-packed with awesome learning events like this, where we're growing our knowledge about business, marketing, arts, and more. Today, we are talking to Eddie and Christian. My name is Jonah from Discover, and how are you two doing?
Pretty good. Hello, Jonah, and hello, everyone.
Yeah, how's everyone doing? Great. I love that intro music. It's really vibing.
It's
We had a good time, like just waiting 30 seconds before it started.
Getting you in we try and set the mood. But, please, everyone watching, hop in the comments. Let us know if you can hear and see us all right. We want to make sure all of that is good. Also, let us know where you're tuning in from, maybe how you heard about Discover or how you heard about No Code. We love hearing that. And if you're watching the replay as well, feel free to comment or write into us. We love to hear your thoughts, whether you're here live or not. And I'm going to make this short because I know we've got a lot to cover today, but a couple things. We are going to have a Q&A after the presentation. So if you have any questions, please try and hold them till then. If you drop them during the presentation, we'll try to get to them, but that's the ideal time to throw them in the Q&A. And if life happens around you, you have to get up or things are moving fast, there will be a replay available. So don't fret. It'll be here on the YouTube and on the Discover event page and emailed to you along with the course offer. A quick call out, Ram is tuning in. Ram or Ram, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, from Luxembourg, here from Gavin. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And today, like I said, we have Eddie and Christian, and we are going to be talking about building startups without code, a guide for non-technical founders. We're going to break down the exact strategies that non-technical founders are using to bootstrap their companies from idea to 20K per month in reoccurring revenue. I've done a couple events with you guys. I just want to vouch right from the get-go that every time I leave this just with so many ideas, and it's such a inspiring and thrilling presentation you give. So I want to get out of the way, hand it over to you, and why don't you take over?
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So Christian will lead the first part, and then I'll jump in with a couple of examples. So I know we have a lot to cover. So Christian, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, let's do this. I'm excited. So yeah, as you can see, the name of this sort of presentation is Building Startups Without Code, and it is a guide for non-technical founders. Now, again, me and Eddie are the founders of We Are No Code, and it's a real honor. We'd like to thank so much the Teachable Discover team, Aaron, Kake, Jonas, and every person that we've basically talked to is amazing. So send them a big shout out as well, please. So let's kick this off. It's a very exciting time right now because it has basically never been better to start a business or an online startup as a non-technical person. And we're going to get more into this in just a second. Of course, turn off your notifications, all that jam, so that you can pay attention. We're going to be covering a lot. Now, we've put on this presentation for many other organizations from around the world, including UCLA, Princeton, USC, as well as startup accelerator programs and innovation hubs. And so I think you're going to get a huge amount from this presentation every time we get awesome feedback. So stick around. Let's kick it off just with sort of who this is for. I'll be very quick in the introductions here. So the first group this is for aspiring entrepreneurs. So you might have an idea, you might have 10 ideas, or you don't have an idea, but you know you want to become an entrepreneur. The aim here is going to be to teach you the step-by-step process you can go to build a company. Now, the second group of people are startup founders. So you're building your business, but you're struggling to build your app, your website, or your MVP because you're non-technical. Here in this presentation, you're going to be learning how to actually build software products quickly and cost-effectively without having any technical skills. Now, what we're going to cover today is as follows. We're going to, first of all, jump in with the non-technical dilemma and why that's important for you to understand as a non-technical founder. We're going to be talking a little bit about the context and how things are shifting. After that, I'll be introducing you to no code, this powerful new way of building software, but also of building startups. We'll be showing you some case studies, examples, and essentially teaching you how you can leverage this yourself. Then we're going to jump into the step-by-step process to actually building a business as a non-technical entrepreneur. Now, as you can imagine, a business is not exactly the same thing as just building an app. So we'll get a bit more into that in that sort of step. And at the end, we'll be talking a little bit more about our program and having a Q&A. Now, we're a little bit different than other courses that you may find because we have lots of different aspects apart from the core curriculum. Now, for those of you who are here, we also have a startup kit. So you can get started immediately after this presentation. Our entire mission is to empower people, and I'll be talking a little bit more about this in a sec. Let me kick it off with an introduction of myself, how we got started with this company, Eddie, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to be very brief here again. So my name is Christian Pavarelli, born in Switzerland, grew up pretty much all over the world, in Brazil, Venezuela, France, Cyprus, Greece, Spain. And so I speak a bunch of languages. I started building companies about 15 years ago. Built 3 startups, raised capital for 2 of those startups, had 1 exit. For a while after that, I was asked to become the director of a startup accelerator program here in Los Angeles, and we trained more than 100 startups who went on to raise more than $40 million in funding and got into some of the top accelerators like Y Combinator, Techstars, 500 startups, and many more. Now, as I was the director of this program, essentially, we would train about 8 startups every 6 months out of about 400 applications. And we would train them for 6 weeks. And after that, we would put them on stage at Google here in Venice Beach, so California. And we would essentially have them pitch in front of 100 to 100 investors. Sorry, 100 to 150 investors. So I've had the luck to work with founders like Frank. Frank is the founder of BuildLane. He went on to raising $300,000 for his startup and getting into Mucker Lab, which is the accelerator that it was started by Mucker Capital, who invested in some of the LA's biggest unicorns. Then I trained Anna as well. So she's actually the founder of AlgoPay, and she raised $350K after the program and also got into Techstars. And also Chris from Audio Cardio. Now, Audio Cardio is this really cool app. You can essentially just listen to music and it improves your hearing. And so it's really awesome technology. But basically, up until this point, I had really only had the experience of seeing founders build companies the traditional way, which is sort of Silicon Valley. You raise some money from investors, you build a team of developers. And that sort of mentality changed dramatically the day that I met Eddie about 6 years ago. So Eddie, you just saw him a second ago. He's my co-founder. At the time when we met, he was the head of product and innovation for one of the largest independent agencies in the US. And he was building prototypes and he was building products for some of the largest brands in the market. So Lexus, Honda, Acura, etc. But what was really interesting is that he had found a way to build products incredibly cost effectively and at lightning speed. And this was something that really interested me. I dug a little bit deeper and quickly found out that he had also built a startup on the side called Sizely. Now, this is a SaaS platform that helps online sellers, so people who have online stores, to actually sort of with sizing. So they get the sizing right, so they reduce the number of returns and refunds from customers. Now, he was able to build this in only 90 days. The total cost of building was $1,000. And the revenue it was generating at the time was $12,000 in monthly recurring revenue. But listen up, he was able to do this without hiring any developers or any technical team. He was able to do this without investors or large upfront costs. And he was also able to do it without leaving his full-time job. And it was basically at this point that I realized that there was going to be a complete new way of building startups that was just on the rise. So the first thing I did was I brought him into the accelerator program I was running, and he started helping other founders. Now, we realized that a huge number of these founders were non-technical, and they were taking all the wrong steps when it came to building out their products, launching it in the market, and they had also massive gaps in sort of how to build companies from the ground up. So at this point, we became good friends. We started working together, and it became very clear and obvious that there was a bigger mission here, something that we would have to build together. And that's the moment we got together to put our 15 years of combined experience into one program And we built We Are No Code. And so We Are No Code, its mission is to empower the next generation of entrepreneurs, specifically non-technical people. And we're able to do this through an accelerator program, a no-code accelerator program that teaches founders on one end how to build out businesses, launch them in the market, so to go from idea to sort of market reality, but then how to actually build products with these no-code tools we're just about to talk about. We've had the luck to train more than 400 founders and startups from around the world, and it's been incredibly awesome. So we've had founders who have come in with absolutely no technical skills, looking to build companies. Others just coming to learn how to build software without coding. So, for example, we had Heidi join. She went from idea to $21,000 in monthly recurring revenue for her platform called Aware Health, fully built without code. Now, when she joined the program, she was a first-time founder with no experience and had no technical skills at all. So this is just, someone who came in, had the will and intent and willing to work hard, and was able to convert her idea into a dream, and now is generating substantial revenue. She's currently interviewing for Y Combinator and Techstars. We also have David, for example, another case study where he essentially had gone through a couple accelerators for some of the major universities, and he still had this problem of how do I build out this product? So he was able to build in only 10 days, and over the next 3 months, he was able to acquire 2,000 users. He went on to win first place at a pitch competition in LA called .LA that was judged by one of the founders of Zillow and the managing director of Techstars LA. And we also have Gavin. He was able to do something a little bit different. I'm showing 3 very different examples. So he was able to go from a sort of a classic business where he was printing t-shirts to a SaaS platform in only 8 weeks. So idea to revenue in 8 weeks with his platform, seps.io. And so you can see here that it's really transforming also traditional businesses into modern businesses for the digital era. We've had the pleasure of working with many other founders, and for us, it's just such an awesome mission that we're on. We have people in 23 different countries, so it's just been a blessing. But let's kind of talk a little bit more about what's interesting for you right now. One of the big things is essentially, it comes down to a quote that was said by Mark Andreessen, where he says, every business is a software business. Now, Mark, for those of you who don't know, he is one of the biggest investors in the world. He runs Andreessen Horowitz in Silicon Valley, big investment firm. He's invested in Airbnb, Slack, Pinterest, Lyft, bunch more. You can go check out the portfolio online. But essentially, what does he mean by this? Well, essentially these days, whether you're building a software company or selling wood, there is some sort of platform that has to be built. There is some sort of technical aspect to any project. So basically, every opportunity requires software. And unfortunately, up until now, there's really only a tiny subset of the population, these individuals called developers, that represent 0.3% of the population, so a third of 1%, who know how to write code, build apps, build websites, and essentially have the hard skills to launch businesses these days. And this really brings us to the non-technical dilemma, right? Which is, so what do you do if you're non-technical and you won't be able to build these platforms out yourself? Well, let me talk a little bit about the context that's happening right now and the reason why this did not used to be the same way. So back in the day, about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 2005, if you had a great idea and you put together a nice pitch deck, you'd be able to raise funding, raise money from investors, and they would finance you to be able to go out there and find people to build this and bring it to market and generate revenue. Now, that has completely matured as the investment scene has matured too. And we're seeing more deals going towards companies that have revenue. So in 2022, basically, you absolutely are going to have revenue to build your startup, or essentially to be able to expect funding. So it really leaves that question. So who actually pays for everything in between, right? How do you build it? Before that, I want to show you a study done by Wing Capital, where they looked at literally 3,800 deals and seeing them increasingly go towards companies with revenue. So in 2010, only 10% of the deals were going to companies that had revenue. By 2017, 50% of the deals were being taken by people who had revenue. And now we're talking about 80% of the deals are going to startups that have revenue. So again, who will pay for the build? That's the biggest question. The sad answer here is you. Obviously, you or your rich Uncle Bill, if you have one, right? So it really brings up the question, right? What are the options for non-technical people? And unfortunately, we kind of find ourselves at this crossroad, right? Where all the sort of solutions don't seem ideal. So one would be hiring developers. Another one would be hiring cheap developers. A third one might be to find a technical co-founder. And the last one might be to learn how to code. Now, let me quickly break these down one by one. So hiring developers. Here are a couple of sort of quotes that I found online showing you that it costs between $25,000 to several $100,000 to build out an app or a piece of software. Now, let me give you a very concrete example here. I had a student that I was training. He had essentially quit his job. He was the VP of sales at one of the major tech companies. And he went on to hiring a development agency to build out his idea. Now, as usual, and as many sort of developers or agencies will do, they'll build out every feature that you have in mind. And he essentially got stuck in endless perfectionism, but had finally been able to bring this app to life. It was this beautiful app that allowed you to essentially earn points by walking and then claim those points at local retailers for discounts. Now, the result of him working with a development agency was that he ended up spending more than $800,000 and 2 years of his life. And he had been able to actually get a solid number of users, but no customers. And when we started digging deeper, I basically realized that he was going to have to completely rebuild his app and his entire software build to be able to reach revenue, because he had not proven buyer demand. He had not been able to prove the business model. And when the reality kicked in, he was going to have to rebuild the entire thing. So very discouraging. And this is one of the reasons why, working with developers early on is not necessarily the right approach. It's expensive. And also they'll pretty much build what you want. And that may not be what the market needs. You're going to have to continually iterate. We'll get into that later. Now, hiring cheap developers, right? This is a great quote. If you think it's expensive to hire a professional to do the job, wait until you hire an amateur. This is a story of Jessica. So she actually was working at Morgan Stanley, really nice job, 9 to 5, and she'd hired some student developers to build out her app. She quit immediately her job as soon as she came up with this idea to hire these developers. And she started focusing on fundraising, right? Because it's what we see in the narratives, right? That's what we see when we go to TechCrunch. Everyone's raising money for their startup. Unfortunately, she didn't have traction. And the result of this was that she ended up spending all of her savings with different student developers. She hired more than one team of student developers because some ended up leaving for holiday vacation. And what ended up happening was 1 year later, she only had a very buggy product, and it pretty much was unusable for what she was going to have to do. Now, she had awesome contacts because she came from really high level in her corporate job. So she was able to get interviews or sort of chats with investors, but raised $0. And ultimately, her startup failed. And so that's a really unfortunate story. But again, that's what you get when you hire cheap developers. Another example is people going overseas, which I've seen time and time again. Now, if you're really, really lucky, you can fall on the right match. But unfortunately, most of the time, me and Eddie have seen that people end up just building what we call spaghetti code. So it is very buggy. And usually once you kind of realize, oh my God, this working overseas is a nightmare, you bring it to someone locally and you see if they can take it from there. They realize basically the code is unusable. And so even though it's cheap, it's a huge waste of money. So this is not a great option either. And then there's looking for a co-founder, right? So I love Pulp Fiction, so I brought this picture up, but this is pretty much what it looks like. Going to networking events and trying to find a perfect tech co-founder. Now, what I would say here is that it's possible. However, the chance of finding a technical person who fits all of the check marks that you need, has all the skills to build out this platform, shares your mission and vision in what you're doing, is easy to work with, and is willing to leave their high-paying job or sacrifice a high-paying job, right? Because they could be working for some of the top tech companies it's very unlikely. So it's kind of like going to a bar looking for a spouse, like a husband or wife. It's possible, it's just very unlikely. So that's why I say this is not a very good option, and I see a lot of people wasting time. The last one is pretty much learning how to code. Now, this is just what I looked like when I tried to learn how to code for a couple of months. It just takes a long time to be able to learn it. It takes, or at least to be able to build something that's of any relevance. And it can get very frustrating. This is what I found for myself. Now, the conclusion of trying to go all these different paths is that I was seeing more and more founders being totally burnt out and usually spending a huge amount of time, between 12 and 18 months, trying to build their startup, a huge amount of money, $10,000 to $80,000 in money spent, missing out on opportunities. And it was leading to much more devastating stuff, like feeling frustrated around your startup and humiliated in front of your peers and other people, losing confidence and sort of starting to get self-doubt about yourself as an entrepreneur, and even way worse things if it came to that. I've seen people fail companies who have really gone into uncomfortable places. Now, obviously, this doesn't necessarily count for people who just account for probably the biggest category in the startup world, people who just never take action. So these are people who talk a lot about their idea. They're constantly, brewing with a new idea, but they're only talking about it. They're not really taking action. It's kind of like they're endlessly daydreaming, and they think that they need to leave their full-time job before they start doing anything. They're kind of waiting for things to happen, and this obviously is probably the biggest killer of entrepreneurship in general. If that's you, there's no judgment. It's just that something has to change if you want to start building out your business. So now is when I want to go over a couple of the big misconceptions, right? There's really just three. The first one is that you have to be technical to build a startup. The second one is that you need to leave your 9-to-5 job to build your company. And the third one is that you need to have investors or a bunch of money to build out this startup because everything's high tech, etc. Now, this absolutely was the case in the old world, but this is completely changing because there's this just revolutionary new way of building startups for non-technical people. And it's called no code. So now we're going to jump into this. I'll explain a little bit about no code, and Eddie is going to take it away with some examples in just a second. So to understand no code, we really have to understand the evolution of programming. Back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, you essentially had these punch cards that you would put in the computers that are probably the size of your entire house. And what you would do is those little punches were essentially ones and zeros, which is what computers up until today understand. That's all they understand. It's the language of computers. Over time, and as processing power got better, and programming languages were invented like Python, PHP, C++, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this was just a language that allowed people to not have to write out all the ones and zeros, right? So just a language in between. And so the best way to understand no code, and by the way, it's also called visual programming, it's that it's essentially these visual interfaces or these tools that allow you to build simple or very complex software without understanding coding and without having to write out coding language at all. So some people think of it like building blocks, Lego blocks of code that you put together to build sort of new solutions. Other people like thinking of it like you're sort of designing in PowerPoint and you're putting the logic like you would be putting it in Excel. And so the evolution of these tools, we can kind of trace back to a long time ago. So even before this, there were platforms like Dreamweaver, et cetera, et cetera. But in 2000s, we essentially had WordPress and Drupal as some of the first no or low code platforms. In 2010, we had the first original no-code platforms, so platforms that would allow you to build online stores, that would allow you to build landing pages, but that kind of lacked flexibility and that also were really limited in terms of what you could build, right? You could only really build these very basic experiences. So no-code is the movement of this entire new generation of tools that allows you to build super complex software. Again, you can also build simple software, but it really is just way more suited for non-technical people. And we're seeing that you can build anything from a messaging app all the way to AI even these days. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But there are essentially about 1,200 different tools out there. It can get very overwhelming when you start playing around with a bunch of different tools. And before jumping into that, I wanted to talk about how these tools actually work. So again, in the old way of designing, for example, you would have to write everything into a console with code. The new way of doing it with no code is essentially visual, drag and drop, point, click, use reusable elements. And as you can see from this interface, it's pretty much like a designer. Now, the way you create logic instead of writing again in a console with code, what you would do is that you would write it out in plain English. So, for example, if I hover over this button, I would like for this button to turn from red to gray, for example, right? So it's just broken down where you don't have to understand coding. It's in plain English, and it's way more adaptable to non-technical people. So looking at some examples of platforms, we have Webflow here, beautiful designer style tool. We also have Adalo for mobile native apps, iOS and Android. You also have others like Bubble that can sort of build probably the most complex software out there. And you see some of the workflows, like, if someone clicks on this button, you would like that person to be signed up as a user, then you'd like them to receive an email, then you'd like to redirect them towards the homepage or potentially a dashboard, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So it's really just a much better way of building things because it's more adapted to average people who don't know technical skills or don't understand HTML or API or all these different things. Now, what are the benefits for entrepreneurs? I'm going to let Forward Partners, who is essentially an investment firm in London, really say it for me, right? This is a chart that they made, and it essentially shows the old model as being sort of traditional way of building startups with coding, and then the new model being with no code. So the time to building your app, MVP, first product, whatever you want to call it, used to be 1 year. Now we're talking about 6 weeks. The cost of building goes from $50,000 to build it with custom code all the way down to less than $1,000. The team that you need to do it went from multiple people, so sort of front-end developer, back-end developer, someone maybe in charge of the middleware, maybe a UI UX designer, maybe a product manager to take care of sort of coordinating the whole thing. Now we're talking about one person being able to do all of those jobs alone. And of course, the capability going from technical to non-technical, a total game changer. Couple other benefits of building things with no code. Well, the first one is intellectual property. If you're building it yourself, you build it, you own it. So that's really awesome. Usually you have to get the developers who are building it for you to sign over the IP rights behind anything they're building for you. In terms of scalability, you can actually scale to more than 100,000 users. Now, this used to not be the case, but there have been so many advancements, and you get to actually benefit from these platforms who are constantly pushing how far these platforms can scale. So it's really exciting. And the last one is cybersecurity. Since these platforms or these no-code tools are being highly sort of, you have companies doing penetration tests for them. You have companies who are really protecting their cybersecurity, not only for themselves, but also for everyone building on their tool. And so you get to actually benefit from their own efforts in cybersecurity, which is much better than building with a small team of developers. Now, as you can imagine, this is completely changing the game. Jason Calcanis, an investor from Silicon Valley, is saying that it's the greatest unlock he can think of for the economy and entrepreneurship, and I couldn't agree more. So now Eddie's going to jump in. He's going to show us a couple real-world examples, and I'll be back with you in just a couple minutes. So see you soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Christian. So now let's jump into a couple of examples that I'm really excited to show you to really, showcase the power when it comes to building a no-code. And I think there are two metrics to really pay attention to is one, the time, and also the cost when building with no-code. So the first example, this is a platform that we built. It's called Clear Segment. It's a platform that allows marketing agencies and marketers to identify targeting segments. In its simple terms, it is a SaaS business. So in other words, a software as a service business. And then if we think about the time it took only 10 days to build the entire platform. And then now for only $40. The tools that we use to build a Clear Segment include Webflow, Airtable, MemberStack, and Zapier. And this is just one example. Another example that I would like to showcase is a website called proofreader.ai. So this particular platform allows you to upload image data, PDFs, screenshots of just text, and Proofreader will essentially proofread that text for you. And then also, if we look at the metrics in terms of time and cost, Here we essentially spent only $500 in 21 days to build Proofreader. The tools that we used were Webflow for all of the visuals. And then we connected it to a Google Cloud Vision API, which is kind of like an AI algorithm to identify text, and then pass it back to the Language Tool API, which is pretty much a free tool that allows you to do proofreading, all in 21 days for $500. Another example, and I think Christian mentioned that quite briefly, is Sizely. So Sizely is a platform that allows e-commerce sellers to visualize sizing information. Here too, the building cost very reasonable, $1,000, built in 90 days. Currently, this platform is at 40,000 users, and the revenue is also a little bit higher. I think now we're hitting $20,000 in monthly recurring revenue. Another example, and I told you guys we'll cover a lot of examples, is a more interesting example is Clamly. So Clamly is a URL shortener that once you shorten a URL and share it with someone else, and they visit that particular page, there will be a cryptocurrency mining software essentially mining cryptocurrencies for you. So the total cost for this particular website was $600, just developed in 2 weeks. In its heydays, we had over 200,000 monthly users, and the total revenue, because this website was only live, I believe, for 7 months, was $38,000. So the total revenue from this was just $38,000. Truth be told, we had to shut down Clamly because after a while, browsers such as Microsoft, Safari and Chrome disallowed the mining of cryptocurrencies. So we essentially had to shut Clamly down. But this is just like one example. When it comes to building products, there's some additional examples that I would like to illustrate, and these are essentially from the community. Danny, for instance, had a really interesting approach to this. So she quit her job without a plan B, and also not knowing necessarily about no-code. After she discovered no-code, she was able to build Scribbly.io, which is a SaaS platform for content marketers, within 8 weeks using no-code. And something that's really impressive, within 12 months, she was able to scale it to $20,000 in monthly recurring revenue, which is just impressive. Another example from the community is an example from Nadeem. He's a non-technical founder. He's the founder of New Year's Stay, which is the luxury version of Airbnb. And they were able, with no-code and no-code tools, to scale a New Year's Stay to $5 million in revenue, in annual revenue. And something that I always like to emphasize, they did it all without investors or funding, because to build with no-code, as you've seen in previous slides, as well as to maintain your software with no-code, is so cost-effective that you just don't necessarily need funding in the early stages. In many instances, you don't need funding at all. Lastly, there's another example I would like to showcase is an example from Charles. He's also, as Nadeem, a non-technical founder. They built Comet, which is a freelance marketplace. And also with no code, they were able to scale it from $0 to $500,000 a month in revenue. And now they're essentially achieved to even raise $13 million in funding after having a substantial amount of revenue in their platform. For those of you, and here are some examples from the community, but I really want to kind of like open up more examples to really showcase what you can do. It's not only websites, but it's also apps. So if you're building applications such as, and here I picked just the hardest one, like Lyft, Uber, Tinder, WhatsApp, and Instagram, you can do that too with no code, allowing you to build functionalities such as the geolocation functionality, messaging functionality, or allowing real-time tracking of, in this case, cars or pedestrians and so on. If you are thinking about building marketplaces such as Airbnb, Upwork, Amazon, Indiegogo, eBay, Fiverr, you can also build that with no code. And we've seen it multiple times over and over again, allowing you to build a profile page, a house listing page in case of the example for Airbnb, as well as configure and build more complex features such as the split payment function, where you have multiple parties, where you essentially have to split the payment in a certain way, and based on your revenue model and so on. And then also some additional examples. No, this is not stopping. So with way more. If you're into social networks and you're planning to build the next social platforms such as LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, allowing you to build features such as the messaging feature, the notification feature, or just like inherent features of any social platform, the uploading and sharing of image, video, or text data, that too is totally possible. We've seen that numerous times in the community. And then also, if you are building some more unique products or working on some more unique ideas, such as you're planning to build the next Netflix or a Salesforce CRM platform or a Pipedrive, which is a sales communications tool. If you're building an app such as Slack, which is a messaging tool, you can build that too with no code, as well as Eventbrite or even Zoom, which is a video conferencing app, allowing you for features such as video calls, various automation streams within your application, and as well as streaming in the case of Netflix. Enough of the examples. We have so many more. You can essentially check them out on wearenocode.com/showcase. Here we essentially combined all of the examples from active startups that are building with no code to essentially showcase what is possible. So when you think about, is this possible to build with no code? In many instances, yes, it is. One question, this is something that I want to, here we go. One question that we get all the time is like, how do I build more complex solutions? And if those above weren't complex enough, I'll just dive a little bit deeper. So you're building all of your main inherent features with no code. Here we're talking about the login functionality, the payments, the split payments. You have your database. You have your user management platform where you have essentially all of the data of your users, your various complex or simple logic flows. All of that can be built with no code. But then if you say, you know what, I want to essentially integrate an AI algorithm, be it in this case one that Google or Amazon or Microsoft offers, or an AI algorithm that you developed yourself, you can essentially integrate it back into your application. If you want to integrate third-party sources, data sources, so in this case, you want to tie in real-time data, real-time weather data, traffic data, stock market data, or maybe housing data from Zillow as an example. You can do that too as well, and essentially have it integrated into your application and pull in the data via an API. And then lastly, if you also want to use Amazon's, Google's, and Microsoft's storage capability, or pretty much any services that they offer, you can also have that integrated into your application, all again with an API. For many, it is a little bit more technical word. However, in no code, it's so simplified that essentially, as Christian also alluded to, that non-technical people can build more complex applications. So when it comes to the building time, so how fast can you build? And here there are two distinctions. If you're building something simple, maybe one feature, this can take a couple of weeks. If you're building something more complex, 50 features and so on, here it is safe to say that it takes a couple of months to learn and essentially build. So with that, last question that we get all the time: can I build my software with no code? As you've seen, and I hope I demonstrated it, yes, you can build your idea with no code. However, it comes with a gigantic however that I'd love Christian to elaborate a little bit more on, because it is a point that many neglect, and I would love for Christian to essentially dive deeper into it and explain that. So in other words, Christian is now the bad cop, giving you the butt.
Thanks for always making me look like the bad cop. And then he just runs away. Great. So anyway, there's just this huge however. All this stuff is super exciting, but let's get back to the reality. Building is not enough. And the reason why I say this is because 90% of all apps in the iOS and Android store are zombie apps. They've not been used for the past 30 days. On top of that, the number one reason why startups fail is because there is no market need for what they're building. And so a lot of people go ahead and build that entire product out only to get to the market and realize, oh, this isn't what the customer wants, or maybe it's a different customer group who wants it, or maybe there are just different features that you didn't even realize. And so from the wise words of Steve Blank, who's one of the founders of entrepreneurship, he essentially said that Build and they will come is not a strategy, it is a prayer. And I couldn't agree more with the statement. So a lot of people are just really focused in on the product. And a great quote for this is really Justin, who says, first-time entrepreneurs are obsessed with product. Second-time founders are obsessed with distribution, because one is actually a lot harder than the other. And Justin, for those of you who don't know him, he's the founder of Twitch. So he sold his company to Amazon for $1.2 billion. Now, the big point here is essentially that a product is not a startup. And there are all these other things around building a company that are required to be able to be successful. So what does the customer actually want, right? What is the right business model to capture the value of that customer? What pricing makes sense for this specific customer? How am I going to go about sales? How should I do marketing? How about building partnerships? What about structuring a team? How much equity do I give? Who are the members that I need? How do I go about fundraising? All these different things that essentially need to be understood and integrated to the product development to be able to be successful with the startup. So now is when we are going to talk about this step-by-step process that we teach our founders to essentially go out and build their startups without any technical skills. So the first step is essentially to set hypotheses, right? So what do I mean by this? Well, at the beginning, you just have an idea in your head, and we really want to become very clear about the high-risk assumptions that are behind that startup idea. What do I mean by that? In the case of Airbnb, one of their big risky assumptions was that people who have a home or a second home are going to be willing to rent that out to a random other person, right? If that was proven right, then, and we know it was, which means that Airbnb is the way it is today. But if it had not been, if it had been proved wrong, then they would have completely had to change the way that they structured their platform, build, etc. The entire company, pretty much. So at first, we're going to go ahead and want to write down these assumptions and put them to the test to reduce the risk. And the risk, who is the person who holds the risk right now? The startup founder, because you are the sole investor of time and energy into your company. In the future, though, risk mitigation is a big thing for investors too. Just a heads up. Step 2 is customer discovery. So essentially at this point, we have a very clear idea of what it is we think the market wants. And now we really have to bridge the gap between our ideas and customer needs, or what customer at least say that they want, or the needs that they're aware of. So at first here, we're going to want to interview a set of people. So we're going to first of all segment your customers. Who is going to be your customer? You're going to come up with who are those different groups. We're going to separate them into different personas. We're going to want to set up interviews with 3 to 5 people in each one of these groups. And we're going to have interviews where we're going to talk not 1 second about your product. You're not going to mention that you're building a startup or that you have a product. We're going to be talking about their needs and see how that lines up with what you are building. So our idea here is we want to determine the problem. We want to determine which one of these groups is your ideal customer profile, because you could go after everyone, but that's a very big mistake early on. And once we've done that, we're going to be ready to go out there and start building a market test. So what do I mean by this? Well, essentially, there's just a massive difference between what people say and what people do. So we're going to want to bridge that to see if people are actually taking an action that shows that they are willing to buy or that proves demand. So obviously for everyone, this is very different. This is why we're going to essentially want to, first of all, craft your value proposition and create all the content we need around it. But we're also going to need to determine the best test to validate your buyer demand, right? It might be a fake buy button. It might be a pre-sales. It might be, getting a free consultation. Whatever it is that proves your demand, that people are willing to pay for what you're doing, is going to be the best. And then we're just going to go ahead and build it with no-code tools. So it's really about structuring the way that you present your product, acting like we figured everything out and it's already existing. But this is really just a way to go out there and test the market. Of course, we're going to want to set up tracking and analytics, because you cannot measure what you can. Sorry, you can't manage what you can't measure. I got that classic quote wrong. But essentially, once we've done that, we'll be ready to move to the next phase, which is phase 4, where we're going to go ahead and promote and sell. So we're going to go out there and start selling to customers. Now, this is going to create a pipeline of future customers. and it's going to tell you exactly the feature set that people want. So first of all, you're going to want to discuss. You're going to want to determine where your customers are, right? Where are these people? Where do they interact online and offline? After that, we're going to create a target outreach list. The point is not to get to millions of people. It's really to create, to do manual outreach and start selling your solution to customers. After that, we're going to go ahead and figure out the key benefits that those customers want to pay for. And that's going to be very obvious when you start trying to sell to someone, is that you're going to realize that there is a lot of pushback. And that's why we're also going to want to fine-tune the messaging based on customer objections, right? So we're going to want to incorporate all of the objections someone might have in buying a product into the messaging so that they have no more reasons not to buy, right? Once we know exactly what it is that people want and we've identified what it has to do, we're going to go ahead and build that MVP. We're going to build that app. We're going to build that SaaS platform, whatever it may be, leveraging no-code tools. So here, we're essentially going to go ahead and determine the 3 key features. And when I talk about the 3 key features, I mean the features that are going to give the customer the benefits that that person is willing to pay for. So we're going to select the best no-code tools to build out that app or that web app. And then we're going to build a minimum viable product, again, with no-code. Now, when we really approach building these products, and the reason why it's called a minimum viable product is because there's a right way of doing it and a wrong way. Now, if we're trying to solve the transportation problem, which is to get someone from one point to another point quicker than walking, then this is the way not to build your MVP, right? Because as we can see here, every iteration of the product does not actually solve the problem, right? 2 wheels is not getting you somewhere quicker. Neither is half a car. It's only until the last iteration that we actually have something that we can sell to the customer. And of course, we know that building a car is very expensive. Now, instead, we're going to want to build it like this. The first product might be a skateboard, right? Because even though it is not super fast like a car, it is going to be faster than walking, and people will be willing to pay for that benefit. After that, we're going to build potentially a scooter, then maybe a bicycle, and every iteration the customer is willing to pay for. You're just getting better at solving that problem. And as you can see here, you're also increasing your price point. Now, the next and last step is pretty much the fun stuff, right? You deliver your product to the customer and you can charge them. You can see your first bill, you can, your first dollar, you can essentially grab that check, kiss it, thank your parents and, and everyone who helped you along the way. And at that point, you're really going to want to go ahead and start gathering feedback so that you can improve that customer experience. Now, of course, at this point, you're going to want to prioritize future features only based on the customer requests. So when you start delivering your product, that's when you're on a constant journey to improve it and also to build products or future parts of the product that are really going to be what the customer wants, not just what you think. So there we go. At this point, I want to congratulate you because you're pretty much light years ahead of most founders that I saw applying for the program. And by the way, this is a problem that people are not building things this way. All over the venture capital world, all accelerators are feeling it too. And at this point in your startup journey, you basically have a path to take, right? And I've seen many people essentially take the path where they want to figure it out on their own. Unfortunately, what I've experienced in this path is that basically it usually is a huge waste of time because these individuals are doing trial and error. They're going around the internet trying to piece together things and watching podcasts, feeling like they're entrepreneurs. And they're usually building also the wrong products that no one ends up needing at the end. So it can be a huge expense. And of course, unnecessary expenses, people spending on lawyers, people spending on company formation way too early. And there's just, you just have to be smart about the when you are spending what. So I've seen a lot of frustrated founders with this. And this was the main reason why we came up with the idea of building our no-code accelerator, the no-code startup. So now I'm going to take a little moment to explain a little bit more about the no-code startup, what it is that we do and how we do it. So the no-code startup essentially is the #1 online program for non-technical entrepreneurs. And we empower non-technical founders. We help them build and launch their MVP without technical skills. We teach them how to attract users and turn those users into paying customers. And then we prepare them for the next step of their journey to understand what it means to raise money from investors if you want to take that route, make them understand how to look good for an accelerator program that's going to invest as well, or simply focus on how to go about revenue growth if you want to keep 100% of your shares and keep building this business either with the co-founder or alone. So again, our program combines the best of two worlds, teaching people how to build products with these powerful no-code tools and teaching people how to transform that product into a business with our startup accelerator modules. And we pretty much provide everything anyone would need to be successful. Now, let's start off by talking about what we actually teach within the program. In our curriculum, in Module 1, we're really going to go ahead and teach you how to write an effective customer discovery questionnaire to start hosting these. We're going to show you how to book interviews with your ideal customers and how to run those interviews. And then we're going to also show you how to analyze the insight from those interviews to uncover the real market opportunity. Now, in Module 2, we're going to be jumping in branding and content. We're going to teach you how to create a brand without design skills and without having a large budget. We're going to also show you how to leverage free icons, illustrations, photography, and much more to be able to go ahead and build that first product, and how to copyright in the way that's really going to attract the kind of customer you're looking for. Again, all step by step. After that, we're going to show you how to structure a market test to validate the demand, as we talked about earlier, how to build your own product with these no-code tools, and how to make it look awesome on all devices, because obviously you don't know if people are tuning in from their iPhone, if they're tuning in from a tablet or mobile device, or I guess iPhone would be a mobile device, or their desktop. Now, in Module 4, tracking and analytics, we're going to teach you how to set it up. We're going to teach you how to analyze and figure out which metrics you have to look at, which are the most important ones guiding your business forward, and how to adapt your product based on the insight and to convert more people. And once you've done all of that, we're actually going to jump into, great, let's build out an MVP. We're going to identify the best tools for your specific build, whether you're building a website, a web app, a mobile app, or a combination of those. And we're going to teach you how to build MVPs, leveraging these no-code platforms, which allow you to go way quicker and to do it way cheaper. We're also going to be teaching you modules around sales and marketing. So how you can plan a marketing strategy to target the right people, how you can also leverage free traffic to get your first 100 customers. Now, what I mentioned earlier is that we're not going to go ahead and start doing marketing to hundreds of millions of people. We're going to go ahead and acquire, in startup world, we call it the first 100 customers. They're the most important ones early stage, and we learn a huge amount that's going to allow us to scale out our marketing strategies moving forward. So that's the part in this last point about how to find product channel fit. So this is once you have product market fit, you need to find out which channel is going to be the most optimal one to distribute your product through. And after you've built out a company and you have revenue, we're going to teach you how to get set up, prepare your pitch deck, financial forecasts. So here, just how to prepare awesome decks. We're going to teach you how to build a go-to-market strategy and how to transform that go-to-market strategy into a credible financial forecast. And people always say this, but I'm terrible at math. You don't have to be good at math. It's pretty simple. Literally, you don't have to do much when it comes to math. If you know how to add, subtract, the rest can be taught. And of course, we're going to figure out which, if fundraising or accelerators are good for you, we have a module teaching you how to pitch, teaching you how to do outreach to investors, so you're not, essentially talking to the wrong people who won't be interested in your business, and also how to make your startup stand out. Now, I know this is a bit long-winded, but essentially it comes down to a program package, right? Everything I've mentioned until now is essentially structured as a step-by-step video curriculum. So this essentially breaks down in detail every step, and it's essentially going to help you take it at your own pace, and you can start at any level. Now, this program is fully no fluff. It's an action-based program. And on one end, we're teaching people accelerator modules, so sales, business models, pricing, marketing. We give you templates and workbooks, blueprints as well as you're going along the journey. And on the other hand, we're teaching you a curated list of powerful no-code tools like Webflow, Bubble, Airtable, MemberStack, Zapier, JetBoost, and a couple other ones we're adding to the curriculum right now. Now, since you are going to want to go through this, and since we're not just a course, we are a full program, we also have live weekly coaching with each founder. Now, the live weekly coaching is with myself and Eddie. You can ask us any questions you have. We give you personalized feedback, and it helps you essentially break through all your roadblocks. So you can take advantage of our experience, all our mistakes, all our successes through this live weekly coaching. And we record every single one of those sessions, so you don't have to scribble down notes. You can watch everything afterwards as well. Now, since you should not wait for once a week to get answers to your questions, we also have a private video support channel. So this gives you video answers to the questions that you have. Oh, sorry about that. It allows you to save a huge amount, and it allows you to give you a bunch of feedback as well on your work. We also have a massive perks package, so $300,000 worth of perks and discounts. It's going to allow you to save thousands of dollars, and we constantly add to this list as well. And you're going to find tools that allow you not only to build your software, but also to launch in the market. So you'll have email marketing, you're going to have management tools, all sorts of tools. Tools like Adalo, for example, to build your mobile app, 6 months for free. Airtable, $1,000 in credit. AWS, $100,000 in credit there. Hotjar, and again, I'm not going to say them all, but 175 different services. So that's really cool to be able to really reduce your costs as you're going along the startup journey. And on top of that, you get access to a global founder community. So more than 400 different founders from 23 countries. You can connect. You can find other people with similar interests. You can exchange skills. We have people who are lawyers. We have people in real estate, doctors, PhDs, MBAs, people from UCLA, people from Princeton, people from all these different places. And there's a lot of value in that community too. So you can find a co-founder, friends, accountability buddies. And since there's been a lot of demand around this, we've also started doing these founder speed networking events. So again, you can do all some of the similar things that I've just mentioned earlier on. But these are one-on-one video chats where you just get to meet other people in the community. So really powerful stuff. Now, again, you're going to get everything within the program package. This is not just a course. This is a course that comes with coaching, that comes with video support, that comes with a massive perks package, a community, and networking as well. And it's 100% online. You can join whether you have just an idea or you're at the MVP stage and just want to go ahead and build. We're going to essentially accelerate your process. And you can take this at your own pace. Now, this is usually an applications-only program. And the main goal of this program is for you to achieve more in 3 months than the average person does in 3 years. Taking a path that looks like the traditional path, something like this, I can tell you from experience, this is what it looks like 1 year and $50,000 later. Or you can choose to take this path, the no-code startup path. Now, there aren't any straight paths. That doesn't exist. But here we're talking about 3 months and $1,000. Now, we were able to essentially put all of this value into a program that would cost only $1,997. So that's equal to 1 credit at a major university. And the aim is because we want to democratize this movement of building startups without code. Now, of course, since we're partnered with Teachable Discover today, we have a very special Black Friday offer where we are giving you 50% off. So $997 to join us today. Now, this will give you access to the accelerator modules, to all the no-code modules, to the live weekly coaching, the perks, the video support channel, the global founder community, the speed networking, and you can even join with a 3 plan that we have. So $397 will give you access today to our program. Now, this is a little bit more expensive because you're paying in 3 monthly installments. If you pay the one-time fee, it's $997, so you save about $200. But overall, you'll save $1,000 on our main tuition. And you can access this offer, I think, on the right-hand side right here, potentially below. I don't know where it's located, depending on where you're watching. And since we believe so much in our program and we have 100% confidence in what we deliver to our students, we also have a 30-day refund guarantee. Now, of course, you won't see universities, you won't see product schools, you won't see any program that does this, but we think it's a fair thing to do. If it's not a good match, if you come in, you put in the work and you don't see the results you're looking for, then we will happily give you your money back. Now, we've also seen students being able to deduct this from their company, right? They put it as an educational expense, and so it is tax deductible. And others have actually been able to ask us for an invoice. We send them an invoice and they can get their employer to pay for it. The invoice essentially says that you are learning how to build software without coding. And in that way, you can get it fully reimbursed. Now, it really depends on your company. And again, check in with your CPA just to make sure. But again, this is a repeatable framework that we're teaching people. It's a way that people can use this framework to build one company, but every future company. So it's really about upskilling incredibly quickly and becoming a founder of the future. And so for me and Eddie, it's just a pleasure to be able to support people throughout that process. People like Harmony, people like Sean, people like Alec, Valerie, Casey, and Lai. Everyone in our community is having an awesome time. And if you think that this is right for you, we would love to have you join. Again, you can join just by clicking the right-hand side and you'll be part of the community immediately, getting access to everything I've mentioned. But again, what we want for our founders is for them to become founders of the future. So let's break this down. What does that mean? Well, it's a founder who's able to identify and fine-tune opportunities very quickly. Someone who's also able to go ahead and build out those apps or those websites, those MVPs, cost effectively and without developers, so not having to take a bunch of risk. And someone who's also able to iterate and to turn their users and paying customers without having to feel like there's some kind of a second-hand car salesman, right? No one wants to feel that way. But our main goal is for people to actually go ahead and take a shot on building the businesses of their dreams. Because I can tell you personally that having gone through this thing as a non-technical founder, this thing that is entrepreneurship, I have found myself frustrated. And the day I discovered no code and this new approach and combining it with startup methodology to build out startups, it suddenly completely changed everything. I mean, I can't tell you the feeling of feeling like you're self-reliant, like you can generate revenue for yourself and you can work from wherever you pretty much want. It's completely game-changing. Now, a lot of us, I think, we feel held back because we don't have the technical skills or we don't want to leave this comfortable job, and we feel, but a lot of those things are misconceptions. And when people talk about the only thing you have to do is get started, that's only part of the truth, right? You'll have to put in hard work, but if you build this way, you're going to reduce the risk dramatically, and you're also going to increase your chances of success. It's about investing in the work. It's about believing that we can become better versions of ourselves every day. So as you can hear, I'm also a huge fan of the growth mindset mentality, where it's basically saying, hey, it doesn't matter where we are today. If we improve, and that should be our only goal, we can reach the places that we're looking for. And the worst thing, the thing that we always regret at the end of the day, is not trying things. It's not trying things and failing. It's not trying things. So if you're one of those people who's being held back right now with all these insecurities or doesn't know how to start or has excuses, then we just want to tell you that we have a path for you, and we'd love to have you in our community as well. So at this point, I'd just like to thank you so much. You can join us on the right-hand side. I think we're going to jump in now and answer some of your questions. So Eddie, you can come live. Jonah, if you want to join the party too.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much. I swear, every time I see this presentation, I'm like just continually like I was even wondering what clients have I had that are no code? What customer, like what websites do I use every day that might be no code that I don't? And like I think this isn't like formally a question, but like Creatio, Notion, like are these companies no code? And I want to ask kind of a question in that realm just to get it started. And everyone, we have Christian and Eddie for a little bit longer, so feel free to pop your comments in there. But like, I think it may be easy to assume you could like tell what company was no code or not. But can you really, or it's that seamless? Like it's not going to look like a novice company or anything, right?
Yeah, I think it, and this kind of like goes to the question from the audience. I think right now there's so many no-code options out there and tools out there. We usually focus on the ones that essentially give you a long-term path to build out the simple functions as well, really, really complex functions. And to be honest, myself, I even have sometimes a hard time to identify if that was a no-code site or not. In many instances, we see also more professional organizations using no code. I mean, Teachable at some point used no code, especially for all of the iterate testing. I know that Adobe used no code, several agencies using no code for their clients. And then Christian, as mentioned before, when I developed products for Honda and Acura and Lexus and so on, we mainly choose no code just for the cost savings and the time savings within an organization, right? So yes, it can be used with an organization, but I think it becomes very, very powerful in the hands of an entrepreneur, and allowing also, in this case, non-technical individuals to build their dreams or to build their startups. So,
yeah, but I think you're right. Like, there is a huge misconception right now. Everyone's calling their platform no code right now, because the reality of the term no code is that it's a little bit flawed, right? It's a cool term to get people like excited about it. But I think also, like, there is code behind everything. And no code tools are simply where you don't have to maneuver that code. So Notion is definitely a no code tool. But then Notion, is very exciting. There's other platforms so it's like, Adalo, Bubble. You also have Webflow. You have others that are more, one that came out of YC, UI Flow, focused on developers. So a no-code platform for developers, because this is also for people to just go quicker. So it also makes sense for developers to learn these tools, specifically people who've learned all types of other sort of languages in the past.
Yeah, and I think the key here is, especially if you start off, you'll have now all of a sudden 20 different options. And I think for all of our students, what we usually do, it's like, okay, what is the goal? What are you trying to build? And then it's like, okay, start here. And then also here are, a list of shortcuts to take to essentially develop faster and get closer to a customer, right?
And that's a huge value proposition in what we do too, right? It's like, we help you navigate what's going to be best for your startup based on where you're at, based on what you need to build, based on your experience level. And that's why it's a great way to kind of get started quick, right? A lot of people just don't have the time to go out. And the people who do, they take the time, they play around with 30 different tools. And then they're like, oh, I didn't really learn any of those tools, and it's missing the point. The point is that you have a goal in mind. And if that goal is to build a company, then, no code is absolutely the best approach, but there's going to be a different no code tool that's best suited for yours. We're constantly adding new things, new little updates that happen into our curriculum. And that's an important thing for people who join now, that they actually do get access to all those updates in the future as well. So one thing I didn't mention, I think that was asked about, was you actually get lifetime access right now with this Black Friday special. So yes, you get lifetime access to the program. That's not something that we could do at scale, but of course, for our friends at Teachable, we're always stoked to do it. And as they mentioned, like Jonah said at the beginning, like, we've had a great time working with this team as well. They're very, very smart, and they actually have used a fair bit of no-code tools to get things off the ground. So
and I think also, just to kind of like illustrate like what lifetime access essentially means is, you might have one idea, but essentially means you can execute on multiple ideas, right? With the ever-growing curriculum, as well as the discount package that I, really want to emphasize, because that saves you a lot of money. I mean, right now we're at 300,000 unofficial. We had $350,000 of discounts, perks for pretty much, I think now 200 services. That essentially will only increase. And I think if you are a business owner, entrepreneur, or a non-technical founder trying to work on your idea and essentially have to and want to execute that, this is pretty much the best deal that we have.
We have new no-code platforms that are reaching out to us every day and want us to teach their platform in our curriculum. Now, our main thing, and the reason why we're valuable, is because we are non-partial. We don't necessarily, we're impartial, sorry. In the sense that we know a lot of these no-code platforms, we've built with many of them, and we're curating a list of these no-code platforms for you and protecting you so that you're not learning a platform that's not going to be around in a couple of years, or that won't have the functionalities you're trying to build out, or that these are all the risks. And I always call it kind of like a weird mace, whereas you have to kind of like try to figure it out. If you take the wrong turn, suddenly, $20,000 lost, or 6 months of your time wasted. And that's kind of this weird path that is entrepreneurship, which is why in a day and age where, there's a lot of other people out there building companies, you have to find an edge. And right now, no code is a massive edge when it's combined with this kind of approach to building startups. Now, in 10 years, this is just going to be taught in every university, and it's going to be required for people to learn these skills to be relevant in their jobs even. So this is a massive shift that's happening that people have to wake up to. And it doesn't matter if you're non-technical. Hey, 20 years ago, I didn't know how to set up an email address. Now you have the opportunity to take advantage, and you can either be an early ambassador, or you can be someone who's just trailing along and is forced into taking this as like later on, because if not, you won't be able to get a position or you won't be able to get a raise. And so that's the reason why we're so bullish about this, is because this is about global empowerment. This is not just about like building a startup or building an app or building a product. So yeah, that's what excites us.
Yeah, one question I want to address that came from Wells Oliver in regards, it seems like he's a aerial photographer and planning to build out a platform where he essentially can book appointments, charge essentially potential clients, and then also sell art, either, made on the fly, or ultimately stock photography that individual has. Totally possible. You could essentially just build that for yourself, in this case just where you individually just own it, or you could essentially expand that into a marketplace where other aerial photographers can essentially do the same process.
But great example, right? Like always the great opportunities is when someone has deep knowledge in a field, and up until now, and sees the problems in that field and is very catered to that field, right? It's a very specific niche that you're talking about. It's a specific type of photography which has a specific use. And now it's figuring out like what is the best customer to go after from there, right? Is it going to be the independent person who just needs like 1 or 2 shots? Is it going to be like the middle-sized companies who need thousands of shots? Is it going to be the, so, and these are like the first ways you should start thinking about it. The product is just a way to get the value of what you have to deliver, which is in your case, these aerial photos, into the hands of the right customer at scale. So don't mistake. That's why we have to not mistake the features with the with kind of like this larger goal.
A couple of other questions that I would love to address is one, is it tax deductible? Yes, it is, especially if you have your own business. This is an educational expense. And then also something that not many really know, if you're working within an organization, in many instances, they have an educational budget that you can essentially tap in. And in many instances, the content that we provide in our program, be it in this case, building your startup, or essentially identifying better tools to do your job at your corporate job better, can be essentially points to have your company pay for that, or in other words, your organization pay for that. Something that we didn't really realize in the beginning, but more and more students essentially did it that way, and we're like, yeah, we totally forgot about it. So essentially now we would essentially try to emphasize that point.
And the objection on that one is always, oh, really? My current company is going to pay for me to learn how to build a startup and escape my 9-to-5. And it's like, well, that's not what's going to be written on the invoice. It's going to be written. It's going to just mention that you've learned how to build software without coding. So,
but they also won't if you don't ask, right? Like I know a lot of those companies, they're not readily just like, oh, we'll give you money to learn.
Most people don't
things.
even know they have access to that. It's $5,000 a year.
In my previous life, when I was working on organizations, usually out of 500 people, maybe 5 or 10 usually use their educational budget, which is mind-blowing. So yeah, that's definitely an option. Another question that I see here, what about a big renting app website like Idealist or eBay? Yes, we've seen various versions of eBay or marketplaces, as well as Idealista. So in other words, if it's a marketplace where you bring multiple people together to buy from other sellers or from you individually, totally possible. Something we've seen numerous times in this space. And yeah, that also is possible with no code.
Well, and just to be something I love about this too, and having seen a couple demonstrations, like first off, a lot of stuff like that is on the relatively base side of what you can do with no code, right? It's when you get into like sourcing facial imaging data, or while that's when it gets more complicated. But also, I just want, like, the coolest thing to me is like, even if no code could be your entire company, it's also just the best way to start a company, right? Like it may not be the end all, but then when you go and hire people, you have a functioning product and you're not like starting from scratch. That's what blows my mind, is like, regardless of where the company ends, if someday you need a bunch of developers, by the time you need to hire them, you have money. You have a company, you have the system.
I would say it's really well suited for early entrepreneurs, right? In many instances, we have individuals coming in. They're like, I have this really complex idea. It needs to be scalable to 3 million individuals, and so on. And it's like, okay, usually if you traditionally develop that, that's 150K to 200K, and then the question is, do you have actually the first 10 customers? In many instances, the answer is like, no. Why don't we first focus on 10, then maybe 1,000, then maybe 10,000, maybe 50,000 users. Then we go maybe to 100,000 users. And at that point, you probably have enough revenue as well as justification of your business model to essentially revamp and build out, more and more features. And this might also mean at that point, you might want to leave the no-code land and go into more custom solutions. And it's totally possible. And if you think about examples such as Twitter and Facebook, they never in the very beginning, were scalable to millions of users. It's always like taking baby steps. And I think for many entrepreneurs, starting with no code is pretty much the most cost effective and straightforward way to start building companies. More importantly, it allows you to iterate really, really quickly, something that you just need to do as a startup in the early ages or in the early stages.
Right. And allows you to like figure that out earlier with less money on the line. Yeah, I think it's so good. I hate to do this, everyone, but we do have to wrap up just because we have another Discoverfest event coming up in just a few minutes here. So I want to first just thank you both. Thank you so much for your presentation and for just opening this whole world. I think it's so cool how a lot of us, it's creeping in. A lot of us are interacting with no code and don't even know. That's what these have been like, always opening my mind up to, and such a blast. For everyone watching, thank you for being here. Thank you for interacting and be present in the comments. Please like and subscribe to the Discover channel if you had a good time. We're trying to bring more creators and entrepreneurs like Christian and Eddie out here to share their knowledge and grow the community. And also check out the link in the description where we have the full Discoverfest schedule for this whole week, because every day this week we're doing 3 to 4 events, and there's a lot of opportunity to learn all sorts of stuff, from no code to a little French to a little German to how to sing better. It's a total blast. And once more time, thank you both so much. Thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you all soon.
Of course.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the great questions.
Of course. See you later.
Take care.